So Carlos, can you talk about an initiative that OEJR is leading that really works to advance economic opportunity and prosperity? And how will this work impact communities and populations that are historically marginalized?
Sure. One initiative I can talk about is our narrative change initiative. We know that narratives shape problems and priorities are identified, and are deeply embedded in our culture and in our institutions and our social practices. Narratives just have such a big role in how we see solutions, potential solutions, and what's acceptable and possible to determine how we solve for those. We know that one of our country's primary cultural narratives around poverty centers around individual responsibilities, but ignores the systemic issues, barriers, like predatory practices and racism that come up. And so there's a lot more of these. So we are working to co-create a new shared economic justice narrative that centers the assets of people of color and recognizes the impacts that racism and racist systems and structures have. The project will help build hope and momentum toward a better future. One of the group's primary goals is to co-create a shared narrative with BIPOC communities and leaders, and really looking to come together to understand what narrative is, to have a collective understanding of that, how it works, and really uncover the harmful narratives that we potentially might be perpetuating within even our own work. Because if we can even go through that, stop using the negative, the harmful narratives that we're using, which we all do, that would be great. But again, we want to move past that and move forward that to then creating counter narratives that really, again, center the lives, experiences, and stories of communities of color. And eventually then how do we disseminate that, and how do we implement that in our work, in our partners' work, in our community work, and potential policy, and eventually the public at large.
Thank you so much, Carlos. I really appreciate what you shared there. And I think the concept of shifting narrative to truly shift the power dynamic is what was certain throughout that. Dr. Lopez, how will this work continue to impact communities and populations that have been marginalized from your perspective?
One is thinking about how those most historically marginalized, their histories have been erased, right? We don't teach their histories. We don't learn and understand those histories, right? And that erasure is a big part of why we have narratives that are harmful and toxic and inaccurate in many ways about those most marginalized. So that's one. Another one is thinking about the assets, right? As Carla mentioned, like the story of marginalized communities is always one of deficit. It's always a story of how bad it's been for these people and how much they struggle and what's wrong with them. They must need something to fix what's wrong with them, right? And not one about strength or solutions or strategies or even their desires, right? When they have a perspective of harmful systems and histories, right, that have kept them marginalized, they have those solutions too, and those are centered in culture. They're centered in people's values and the generational desires of families, right? That have come and gone, and what we hope for the future generations as well. So I think new narrative work provides a different language and a different understanding then about what it means, what economics means, what justice means, right? And then what those two things together look like in action, particularly as we think about how our systems are failed in many ways, and how we have the public in America has less and less trust of institutions to handle our problems, right? To take care of us. And so we need, channeling an abolitionist perspective. Like we need new structures to replace the ones that are insufficient. And in order to get there, we need new narratives, right? We need new ways of talking about it, of understanding it. And I think this has been one of the biggest success of the Black Lives Matter movement, for example, right? That has created a new language, a new way of thinking and talking about race and understanding the systemic nature of race, right? That we necessarily didn't have. So when we have those new narratives that are formed and developed by those most marginalized, right? Then that really sets us up to think about what new structures we need, what are the new conditions that need to be set, right? So narrative work is so fundamental to creating new realities.
I agree. Thank you so much for that. And I think, you know, the erasure that you were talking about and the constant conversations that folks are having around really truly, you know, what that looks like, and those who are scared of having the conversation, I think, you know, let's really understand what are things like critical race theory, what are projects like the 1619 Project really asking us to consider around the truth of so many in our country. And so thank you for bringing that up. And I really appreciate considering narrative eventually towards a shared lexicon so that we can do a better job of serving ourselves collectively as humanity. And, you know, I think advancing, right? Not even just saying this is a really resilient community. Why do they always have to be resilient, right? Let's talk about how vibrant and how robust capacity already is for communities who have been, you know, inhibited by so many things, but who have been thriving in certain ways and can do so much more. And quite honestly, the opportunity cost of everyone not being a part of our economic future. You know, we need to do this better for all of us. And the narrative work, I agree, is certainly centered in that movement.